With a name like Titus Young, maturity is the last thing that comes to mind. But 2 arrests in a 15-hour span? Come on. After getting booked for suspicion of drunk driving, Young went all Tarzan and climbed a tow yard fence just to get his impounded black Mustang. Smooth move. Young has said in the past that he's a better wide receiver than Calvin Johnson. Maybe Young meant he's a better sleeper. This guy crashed at an AT&T store, for crying out loud. Either way, Young is a free agent, and Johnson is known as one of the best in the business. Young's own high school coach thinks that he belongs in a mental institution. So maybe his off-the-field issues are because of an insane drug habit, or he has a mental illness. Who knows? 2 things are for certain. Young's black Mustang remains in the tow yard, and Young can kiss his NFL playing days goodbye.
It's Sunday, June 2nd, 2013. I'm Kevin McShann, and this is the McShann Sports Beat Report. Confronting your transgressions with conviction while also balancing the ills of your character and chemical imbalance can prove to be a delicate tap dance if you're unwilling to step to the forefront and accept personal responsibility and take accountability for your actions. For ex-Detroit Lions wide receiver Titus Young, his life's roadmap has taken him off course, leaving him without an identity or purpose to his life. The NFL and its Players Association has attempted to, on numerous occasions, to reach out to the troubled wide receiver before the bevy of his off-the-field problems began. However, according to a recent report published by Yahoo Sports, Young himself has rebuffed and been reluctant to accept any sort of olive branch that anyone associated with the league has offered. Troy Vincent, the NFL's director of player engagement, told Yahoo Sports that a person in Titus's inner circle contacted the league over a year ago to express concern about the actions of the former troubled star. It was someone who was very, very close to him, who was just concerned, very concerned, Vincent told Yahoo Sports. Once we got the call, we sent someone out to meet with him. Young's problems have been well documented. The 23-year-old has been arrested 3 times in less than a month in California, including twice in 1 day. He is currently jailed in Orange County and faces up to 10 years in prison on 11 counts of burglary, attempted burglary, and assaulting a police officer. He also faces prosecution on a DUI charge. Vincent reiterated that his office attempted to turn over every leaf to help Young diagram a successful game plan for the future. However, their efforts were not reciprocated with genuine thanks and gratitude by Young. We were told he's not interested in support, Vincent said. We went to people very close to his center of influence to reach out to see how we can support him. The response was of someone who has not opened arms to being supported. Vincent's department is geared towards helping current and former players deal with off-the-field issues The league has a hotline that players and their families can call 24 hours a day for assistance. Chicago Bears wide receiver Brandon Marshall, who suffered from his own personality disorder in the past, is one of the NFL's success stories when it comes to this very topic, and he says the key for Young to reclaim control of his life is surrounding himself with positive resources and the people he associates himself with.
By Bears wideout Brandon Marshall, who had his own issues with a personality disorder and is now an advocate for mental health issues. Brandon, as you look at what's going on with Titus and the things that he's been through in the past year, what immediately comes to mind to you?
You know what? He needs to put the right people around him, and he needs to get the right treatment plan. You know, like you said, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder a few years ago, and got the right help, the right treatment, and now I'm advocating for it. Mental health in itself is just so stigmatized, and it's a taboo topic in our homes and our communities, and we need more people to talk about it and not make Titus Young or people like myself or others who can't fight for themselves, a national punchline.
When you see the things that Titus has gone through, is it reminiscent of things that you remembered about yourself?
Well, you know what? Not every case is different. Mental illness hits on both ends of the spectrum. It presents itself in so many different ways. But with Titus, I see this not only with guys across the league, but I see this in so many of our communities. Me being in Chicago, we see it every day in the newspaper, on the news, walking the streets. It's one of those situations where, you don't always have to be diagnosed with a disorder. Say if there's a trait, there's 9 traits of a disorder, it may be 5 to be diagnosed. It may take 5 to be diagnosed. Well, you can have 2 of those traits not working properly in your life, and it can make your life into a living hell. So guys like, Titus Young, it doesn't necessarily mean he has to be diagnosed, but if we're not treating, these cases properly, it just gets worse, and I look at, my situation, and there was times where I was talking to 2 or 3 different people, in a week, and it wasn't getting any better. And it wasn't until I went to McLean Hospital, was in an outpatient program, and sat down and really worked through stuff that, was just in me for years. And now I'm sitting here advocating, our foundation, the Brandon Marshall Foundation, Project Borderline. We're advocating, we're fighting, we're trying to get better treatment. We're trying to get better policy so people can afford it, for different disorders to be classified right. We're trying to be lead in the field and research, try to partner with the right people to see the ideology behind some of this stuff, where this stuff starts from. A guy like Titus, I hear people say his career is over. Well, first of all, it's really not about his career right now, it's about his life. And second of all, if he gets that in order, we'll be looking at a success story. And this is a guy who will be in a locker room and guys will be coming to him for advice. Right now, just 2 years removed from my fight and my battle, every day I'm sitting down talking to guys, guys across the league. So, mental illness is a taboo topic. It's highly stigmatized. And instead of us making it a national punchline, I think it's time for us to really look at this thing and see what's going on, Boston, right. In our school systems.
Brandon, along those lines, have you had a chance to reach out to Titus?
You know what? I'll keep our conversations personal, but months back, I wanted to get my hands on Titus, just sit down with him and possibly, walk him into the doors of the same program I was in, but I think there were some things in a way that kept us both from, moving forward, and I am disappointed in that, because since then it's just gotten worse. And one of the things I stressed was, without the proper treatment, it's just going to make things worse. So I'm praying for Titus, and I know, this can be a success story, but we need to embrace it, and we also need to advocate for people in positions like this.
And assuming that door is still open, and you're going to try and, if you have time, because I know things are getting busy now with the offseason and OTAs, you'd still relish that chance to sit down and talk with him?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm here for. Football, I think, the Lord's blessed me with amazing talent and amazing ability. I don't think I was responsible with the ability and the talents he's given me the first few years in the league. But one thing I know now is football is my platform, not my purpose. So, my purpose is to bridge the gap in our community between patients and clinicians and clinicians and family members to really advocate. So this is what I do. This is my passion. This is what will last longer than way longer than when I'm off this planet. So I'm excited about the future, and I think we're going to turn this thing into everyday conversation.
Vincent, who enjoyed a 15-year playing career himself, says that he still remains optimistic that his office will be able to help Young rectify his problems. We can reach out, which we've done, Vincent said. We look to assist and support to get him on track. We've reached out. We have been reaching out prior to his last incident. We've been working hard for quite some time. In this situation, everything is available to him, he said. Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith of ESPN's First Take reluctantly took up the subject of Young, and both men agree that it's important to gather all of the facts before passing final judgment.
How should the NFL respond to this sort of situation?
Well, they should be incredibly thoughtful and careful in how they publicize their handling of this. I'd say that first and foremost. And let me preface my comments by saying, giving a level of gratitude to both yourself, Kerry, and Skip, because obviously Skip, it was a bit reluctant to talk about it because you didn't know what to say because we don't have all the facts in front of us. And it was something that I personally insisted on talking about. I wanted to talk about it. So I thank you, Skip, for bearing with me on this. Here's where I'm coming from. Brandon Marshall was somebody that was suspended for 3 games. Ultimately, his suspension was reduced to 1 game for some of the troubles that he had. You had other players that were suspended, the Pac-Man Jones of the world and others. They obviously had problems. Clearly, in the case of Pac-Man Jones as well, there were issues that were well noted and what have you, and we all know what happened to Big Ben Roethlisberger. Even though those were separate incidences, he was never arrested or anything like that, but the accusations that were levied in his direction obviously was something that impugned the integrity of the NFL, and the NFL, as a result, felt the need to suspend it for 6 games before ultimately reducing it to 4. What I'm trying to say is, based on my conversations with a Brandon Marshall in the past, somebody that I've grown to respect even more, who I think his heart is definitely in the right place. I think we all should be influenced in terms of our heart being in the right place, recognizing that this guy, Titus Young, has a problem. We should be sensitive to it. We should be insistent upon him receiving whatever help that he may need, based on what Brandon Marshall was alluding to, based on what his father alluded to. But that doesn't give him the right to work in the NFL. And that's what this comes down to. Am I advocating unemployment? Absolutely not. But am I advocating that he be treated any differently as opposed to a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, who was never arrested, let alone arrested 3 times in 1 week? And one accusation or one allegation was about burglary and then resisting arrest, where officers had to lay their hands on him, where he was trying to, lay his hands on them, reportedly. Those are issues. And I don't understand how somebody like Big Ben Roethlisberger, never arrested, never indicted, you understand, nothing like that, can end up losing 4 games out of a season. But this guy gets to operate with impunity. Of course, nobody is saying that that definitively is going to happen. I'm simply saying it can't happen. The priority has to be us having a level of sensitivity towards his problem, not dismissing any mental health issues, addressing it with the fervor that it deserves, which Brandon Marshall has been on a mission to bring attention to, and I applaud him for that. We just can't lose sight of the importance of fairness to all of those other folks who may not have those problems, who may not have deserved such punishment, but incurred it anyway. But yet you look at this guy and you give him a pass because of whatever mental issues he's suffering from. Clearly, he needs help. Clearly, he's somebody I hope gets the help that he needs. I hope that in the event that that happens, he ultimately is back in the NFL. I would hope that the NFL would assist him in providing, in receiving help, the help that he needs, because he's one of their own, and they should if they can. But ultimately, the reality of the situation is he's got a problem. And as long as he's got a problem, he can't be in the NFL bringing these kind of problems to their name, because if you allow that to continue, then what about all the other dudes that you may want to punish down the line? I mean, if all they, and I'm not trying to dismiss it, because it seems to me this guy really has a problem. But we know how this world works. His problem may be legit. There are others who might use it as an excuse where that ain't their problem at all. Their problem might be stupidity, irresponsibility, etc. And they might use that as an excuse. That's a dicey line for the NFL to play with. And I say, do what you can to get this guy some help. But please understand, for those sympathetic to his plight, that doesn't give him the right to still work in the NFL until these problems are solved. He's got to get them solved, Skip.
And that's my problem discussing this story. I don't know what his problem really is, Titus Young. Stephen A., I'm fascinated by the story. We all are. We rubbernecked this story because he got arrested, 3 times in 2 days? Or
5 days.
5 days.
3 times 5 days.
And every time you read another story, you say, what? Again? So, I've been doing this for a long time, Stephen A. Some people have disorder problems, diagnosable, treatable problems. Some people are just bad to the core. They're just born bad. I can't explain it. I don't know what to do about it. And I don't know where Titus Young falls. So I read the comments from his father, who says that his son suffers from a disorder caused by his brain being compressed in the front of his skull during his rookie year. Couldn't remember the name of the disorder, but said that after he suffered a concussion his rookie year, this disorder came to be. The Lions never listed him as having a concussion his rookie year. So I don't know what to believe here. The problem that he faces right now, Titus Young, is that nobody's going to sign him for next year because it's just too many incidents. Remember, he had a string of on and off field incidents that finally forced the Detroit Lions to cut him loose. Remember, he even sabotaged plays, he admitted last year. He's upset with the way he's being handled. Lined up in the wrong formations on purpose. Was this because of his disorder from a concussion? I don't know. I don't know what to say. Nobody knows. I do know this, though. I believe in Brandon Marshall. I've told you this before. We've had him here on the show. I like him and I believe in him. And I believe in his conversion, both with his disorder and with his spirituality. And I like what he said about Titus Young. He seems to have had some interaction with Titus and has some real insight into Titus's potential disorder. So I would take that part to the bank. If Brandon's telling me this is treatable, that he does suffer from something that is actually diagnosable, okay, then God bless him. I hope he gets help. Dad says he needs a court order to make a judge is going to have to force him to take already prescribed medication. Okay, good. Be my guest. Clean yourself up. Show us that you can now cope again back in the real world. And then he does deserve a second shot in the NFL. Right now, for next year, I don't think that's going to be a possibility. I could be wrong about that. So I don't think the NFL is going to have to rule on it or suspend him. I just think nobody's going to give him a shot next year because it's just too many incidents in a row.
You know, and it's always a dicey subject to touch on this, but you know, obviously we've got the format that allows for it. Skip, listen, you know, you don't want to come across as unsympathetic, you know, and lacking empathy in any way. You want this guy to receive all the help that he needs. I hope that he receives the help that he needs, assuming he does need help, and that he ends up back in the NFL. But the reason I felt that it was important to touch on this subject, because on far too many occasions, we find ourselves talking about athletes who find themselves in trouble. But one of the deterrents to it is essentially outing them. Now, in this particular case, it may not apply, but it's incredibly important that we understand that the people who really deserve to be talked about, who really deserve to be praised, who really deserve some sympathy, are people far more often than not who are exposed to these circumstances, and they're not the ones with problems. You're the vast majority of NFL players go to work, do what they got to do. They got problems too. Now, it may not be the same as Titus Young. It may not be the same as what Brandon Marshall described himself going through, and I applaud him for doing that. Yeah. And I'm a fan of Brandon Marshall. I'm not knocking him in any way. I'm simply saying, when you talk about empathy and sympathy, I'm talking about what about the people that are doing things right, but find themselves subjected to certain circumstances that ultimately provoke stiffer rules and regulations and stuff like that have nothing to do with them, their actions, their behavior, nothing. It gets to a point where that one bad apple ruining the whole tree comes into play. Well, there's nothing wrong with the other good apples saying, damn, how come we got to be exposed to this yet again?
Young's father, Richard, recently told Detroit newspapers that his son suffers from a mental health disorder and is in desperate need of help. The Lions drafted Young with the 44th overall pick in the second round of the 2011 NFL Draft. However, they released him in February due to his brushes with the law, a drop in productivity, and clashes with both teammates and coaches. Mike Valente and Terry Foster of 97.1 The Ticket provide some local spin to this troubling story. And while both men agree that the onus is on Young to take back his life, they also concede that better parental protection and guidance for Young could have helped to prevent this tragic situation.
The Ticket. Money and Foster could have you more. Terry, you want to get to the Titus stuff with his father? Go ahead. You want to clear the way for you? You're a parent. You get first dibs at it. All right. That sounds beautiful. Titus Young was arrested for a third time. And there's a lot of things going through my mind with this as far as Titus Young is concerned. And I think Mike and I are going to be in agreement on one thing, that the parenting needs to be a little bit stronger, even though Titus Young is a grown man. When a dad doesn't know what disease his son has, to me that's a problem. There's a disconnect between the two. But the bottom line is something that we have believed for a long time, that Titus Young has a mental disorder. He's on medication, and then he's not on medication. And that appears to be the main thing that's driving him to his latest troubles. Now, the parental thing that I have a problem with is, if you know that your son or daughter is sick, you have to do everything you can to force them to take their medication, to force them to seek help, and to seek it over and over and over again. And that is not happening with Titus Young. And I know earlier I said that you can't force a grown man to do something, but I think as a dad, you pretty much have to. Now, I know there's some things that Mike wants to say, and I want to position that way because I want to counter, because I disagree with something, but I wanted you to present it. But as far as Titus Young is concerned, and this is one of our main questions, do you kind of understand now what's going on with him? And when you look at Titus Young, got mental disorders, but you still look into him as victim or jerk. Been arrested 3 times, He couldn't stick with the Lions, couldn't stick with the Titans. There always seems to be something going on. We talked about something is going. There's going to be a bad headline down the road. But as you look and view Titus Young today, jerk or somebody that really, really needs help and he can't help himself. 248-539-9797.
Terrence, I think that's a dangerous way to put it out there. I think it's probably both. Here's my issue with all of this. All right, my issue is it's clear he has mental issues. There's no doubt about it. But I think it's disingenuous to go out and simply go, well, he's got problems, and that's all the reason he does what he does. I think there's a little bit of both here. There are plenty of people who have something wrong with them. There are plenty of people who have mental illnesses they need to deal with that don't use it as a crutch to cause mayhem. Now, again, varying degrees, perhaps it is this serious. But I have a big problem that Titus Young has had these problems for how long, and the people around him seem to be passing the buck. Whether it's his high school coach saying, well, you know, I thought I'd see him soon, but I haven't. Whether it's his dad saying, well, I don't know what he's got wrong, I forget the name. Or, well, it was a concussion last year. You know what? You're his dad. In the story with the dad, he goes, Dad, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go into the car and grab something, knowing he's not supposed to be driving. You knew the keys were in there. As his father, you tell him flat out, you're not going anywhere near the car. You know, the sister says she's reached out. At some point, though, we're talking about, what, 5, 6 years? Got all the way back to 07, 08 when he was at Boise and got suspended for hitting a teammate the first time. I just think it's disingenuous to the people who have an imbalance or a mental issue to sit there and just make that the one reason he's doing all of this. I find that hard to believe. I think he is a bit of a jerk, too. I think that's the problem. And I think you need to pass responsibility on partially to the people around him that, for lack of a better term, are enablers. That's my beef. That's my problem.
Here's a quote that from Richard Young, and this is Titus's dad. And if you believe this, it kind of shows that Titus Young is out of control and maybe out of control with his senses. Here's the quote that Richard Young had told, I believe it was the Free Press. He said, Daddy, I don't know what's going on with me. This is Titus Young speaking. He said, I don't feel good. I just started crying. He said, I just don't feel good. I'm not myself. I don't feel good, Dad. I don't know what's happening to me. Now, if you believe that quote, this sounds like a guy that sometimes doesn't know what he's doing. Now, when I grew up on Vancouver, 2 doors around was Mrs. Nelson. Mrs. Nelson was the nicest woman in the world. She would bake brownies for us. She would bake cookies for us. She would have us on the porch and talk to us. But now and then, a couple times a month, Mrs. Nelson turned violent. And what she did is she would go out and ranting and raving and screaming at people, screaming at her husband, threatening to kill people. And then the police would come. They would take her away, and then she'd come out, and good old Mrs. Nelson was back again. So, you know, is she a jerk, or was there the demons or whatever, the mental illness had taken over her? Had an uncle. He shot himself. Nicest guy in the world, but he had mental problems, and you knew it. A lot of times, you wouldn't even notice. Just one of the regular guys. And then he would go on his rants, and then he would do something stupid, and then he couldn't help himself. And eventually ended up killing himself. So, I mean, I just think this whole mental health thing, I don't understand it. I just think it's so complicated.
It is, and you know what? You're right. That's the problem where I go back and forth with it. I also think in 2013, where we're at now as a society, I'm not claiming that with Titus alone because we don't have enough information. I don't like what I hear from his father. I don't. And I don't like how, as a society, we just label somebody and go, well, that's why they do what they do. No, I think there's multiple factors. My thing is now there are many who use this stuff as a crutch. Oh, your kid's not doing well in school, so there's got to be something wrong with him. No. How about your kid works harder? Not everything's a diagnosis. We've become a pill society.
But this case, this guy is on
medication. I understand that. I clearly stated that. Follow along.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I just don't know what you're going to get out of the people here. It's on them to respond to it. I've given you my take on it. 248-539-9797, and you can lay your question out again.
I had a problem with someone who was on Doug and Gator today. A guy called in and just said, hey, Titus's dad should just get his son off the crack pipe. I think that's the mentality that we've got to fight in a situation like this. But when you look at Titus Young and you know, read the things that we've read the last few days, Now, do you believe this is a guy that really, really needs help? Or, and in the case, there's a lot of people have called in here, do you still believe he's just a bad guy? 248-539-9797. I've always believed he's not a bad guy, but there's something driving him that that maybe he cannot control, and the rest of us do not understand.
Do you buy that as the complete reason he's doing what he's doing? Is it dangerous to do the whole moonlighting psychologist? Yeah, a bit. But I think it's okay for people to form an opinion based off of you have a track record. You also have, in my mind, Terry, and this is where you need to speak up on it, or Matt does, or certainly you, the listener. If you've got a kid, you have to go the extra mile. You've got a brother or sister, you have to go the extra mile to get them what they need. And I don't think it's acceptable to sit there and again, well, I don't know the name of it. Well, it might have been a concussion. That to me, that's not a good look. You're better off not saying anything at all. Don't let him go to the car. Don't let him go in when he's not supposed to be driving, when you know the keys are in the car. That's your job as a dad.
It is.
Isn't it?
It is, but a lot of people don't know how to handle this. You know, a lot of times, like I said, I've known people who've had some mental illnesses and things, and here's what their families say. Oh, he just touched. That's all. You'll be okay. And to me, that's people who don't want to deal with the issue, and also people who are a little bit ignorant. Hey, if somebody's got a problem like this, you need to be on them. You need to help them the best you can.
But Terry, I think, Terry, you'd agree that if your son or daughter had some issue, you'd know what it was.
Oh, of course.
You wouldn't be on the phone with the news and free press going, oh, my kid's got some issues, but I don't know the name of it.
Something bad, yeah, but I don't know what it is.
Right,
No,
but that to me, that's unacceptable. And by the way, it's been something this guy's obviously dealt with for 6-7 years. I just refuse to turn Titus Young into a martyr. Because on some level, I don't want to start a war with this, but hear me out briefly. On some level, there has to be some personal accountability. I find it really hard to believe that this many people nowadays just have the inability to accept that they need help, or the inability to, or willingness to try. Now, if it's bad enough, you want to tell me someone is just totally gone, totally detached, you're probably right. I'm making a point with this, with an NFL career on the line, with all of it. I'm going to have to really see some amazing diagnosis with all this, or hear something unbelievable to steer my opinion to where there's no responsibility on Titus Young for his actions. None. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but here's the biggest problem with Titus Young. He doesn't think he's got a problem. It's everybody else.
I know, man, and
That's the problem I have. He's got to realize, oh, I do have a problem. I was on medication for a reason. I'm out of the NFL for a reason. But I think still in his mind, and sometimes you read the tweets that he's had, is everybody else is messed up, not me.
So you don't think there's a single ounce of this? And I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm not trying to argue with you. You don't think there's a single ounce of this that is him having a maturity issue, or it's him not being a stand-up guy? You don't think there's any of it? You think he's that out of it?
I think he's that out of it.
Wow.
And I base it on some of the conversations I've had with him, and I've never walked away and said, yeah, this guy's just like everybody else.
Is it ill-forgotten ignorance or a desperate cry by a stubborn man for help? No matter the answer, Titus Young has reached a crossroads in his life. His moral compass has failed to point him in the correct direction, and his conscience of good judgment is broken. This is a young man that has to take control of his own destiny. He has plenty of time to think, ponder, and rationalize his next move in life. He must change his life course and rebuild his character before he even begins to think about a return to the gridiron. There are many contributing factors to this current state of affairs involving Young himself, and one of the hardest things for an athlete to admit to is that they have a problem. Titus Young's train is off the tracks, and the people and influences he has in his life have failed to step up to the plate and provide him with a blueprint for success. At the end of the day, there is a troubled young man who is in desperate need of someone to reach out to him in order to rectify the problem he currently faces and receive treatment for his illness. However, by the same token, it's incumbent upon him to make sure that he reaches out and accepts every olive branch which has been afforded to him. In this case, pride does not have to come before the fall. Young has to rebuild his image, and the first step to doing that is undergoing a thorough evaluation of oneself. Young has made some troubling decisions in the past, and as he sits in prison for his recent arrest and misdoings, my friends, he has to take an assertive posture if he wants to turn his life around before his champagne bottle of tolerance flows over and is no longer capable of dealing with the ills that ail him. Regardless of his athletic talent and acumen, Titus Young has to make a new priority list. And now it's time for Young to step on the moral and ethical stage of individuality and start performing up to par with the rest of reality. However, my friends, this is a cautionary tale of a young man who has to reevaluate his influences and the people he holds near and dear, because if he doesn't make the appropriate adjustments sooner rather than later, then this story could very well indeed have a tragic ending. However, the good news is that there is assistance and options in which to bear. And now it's up to Young to take the appropriate actions in order to transform his life. Kevin McShane, Sports Beat report.